Montana Territory, 1878. The wild frontier had claimed more souls than Samuel Miller cared to count. At 26, he'd already seen enough death to last several lifetimes. The unforgiving land took, without mercy, parents from children, husbands from wives, leaving broken hearts scattered across the plains like tumbleweeds. Samuel dismounted his chestnut gelding at the edge of White Rock Creek, a settlement barely worthy of its name on any map. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street. His tall frame, hardened from years of cattle driving and ranch work, drew curious glances from the locals. Despite his youth, a certain weariness hung in his emerald eyes, the kind that came from living too much life in too little time. No point in putting down roots, Samuel muttered to himself, adjusting his worn leather vest over a simple cotton shirt. The land just takes it all in the end. He believed this truth to his core. Love was a luxury for those in safer places, not for men who lived by their wits and their colts in territory where law was still more suggestion than rule. Samuel had built his existence around solitude, convincing himself it was strength rather than fear that kept him moving from town to town, ranch to ranch. What Samuel wanted was simple: enough work to fill his saddlebags with enough money to keep moving west. Maybe California eventually, or up to the Washington Territory. Somewhere new where the ghosts of his past couldn't find him. What he told himself he didn't need was attachment, not to people, not to place. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got men killed out here. As he led his horse toward the town's only saloon, he overheard two women talking on the boardwalk. "Poor things," said one, shaking her head. "5 children with no place to go since the Miller farm burned. Miss Katherine does what she can, but that schoolhouse ain't meant for living," replied the other. Samuel paused, the name catching his attention. Miller. No relation, surely. Miller was common enough. But something about the conversation tugged at him, a distant memory of his own childhood, before fever took his parents and left him alone at 12. That night, Samuel bedded down in the hayloft above the livery stable, staring at the gaps in the wooden ceiling where stars peeked through. Sleep refused to come as his thoughts drifted to those children. Orphans, just as he had been. The difference was they had each other, while he'd had no one. "Not my concern," he whispered to the darkness. "Got enough troubles of my own." The following morning dawned clear and crisp. Samuel stood at the counter of the general store, purchasing supplies for the trail ahead when the bell above the door chimed. In walked a young woman whose presence seemed to brighten the dusty shop like a ray of sunshine. She couldn't have been more than 22, with honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, though rebellious tendrils had escaped to frame her face. Her simple blue calico dress, while modest, couldn't hide her natural grace. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson," she called cheerfully to the shopkeeper. "I've come for those books you ordered. Miss Julia Katherine. Right on time. Got them just yesterday." The shopkeeper ducked behind his counter and produced a small crate. Samuel found himself staring, hat in hand. There was something different about this woman, a quiet determination in her blue eyes that caught him off guard. As she approached the counter, Julia noticed his gaze and offered a polite smile. "Good morning," she said simply. "Ma'am," Samuel replied, nodding respectfully. Mr. Peterson chuckled. "Miss Katherine here is our schoolteacher. Finest one this territory's ever seen, if you ask me." "You're too kind," Julia replied, her cheeks coloring slightly. She turned to Samuel. "Are you passing through or staying a while, Mr. Miller?" "Samuel Miller. Just passing through, ma'am." He found himself oddly tongue-tied, unusual for a man who typically kept conversation to the bare minimum. Her eyes widened slightly at his surname. "Miller? That's—" She hesitated. "There were a family of Millers just outside town. Their farm burned 2 weeks ago. The parents didn't survive." Samuel felt a strange chill. "No relation, ma'am. Common name out west." Julia nodded, but her eyes lingered on him with a curious expression. "Well, Mr. Miller, perhaps you might consider staying in White Rock a bit longer. We could use strong hands, especially now, with those poor children needing shelter before winter." Before Samuel could refuse, a commotion erupted outside. They rushed to the doorway to find 2 young boys scuffling in the dirt street, surrounded by 3 other children watching with varying expressions of concern and excitement. "James, Thomas, stop this instant." Julia hurried forward, setting her books aside as she pulled the boys apart. The younger one, no more than 7, had tears streaming down his dirt-smudged face. "He said Pa wasn't coming back," the younger boy cried. "He's a liar." Samuel watched as Julia knelt between them, her expression compassionate but firm. "Thomas, we've talked about this. Your father was very brave, but he can't come back. And James, you know better than to speak cruelly to your brother." The scene struck Samuel with unexpected force. These were the Miller children, orphaned by fire, clinging to each other and to impossible hopes. In the younger boy's face, Samuel saw himself at that age, raging against truths too painful to accept. Before he realized what he was doing, Samuel stepped forward and crouched beside the younger boy. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the bravest thing a man can do is keep going, even when it hurts. Your pa would want you to be brave for your brothers and sisters." Thomas looked up at him, tears subsiding. "How do you know?" Samuel swallowed hard. "Because that's what brave men do." Julia watched this exchange with surprise, her blue eyes studying Samuel with newfound interest. As the children calmed, she gathered them close. "It's time to return to the schoolhouse. We have lessons this afternoon." As they walked away, Samuel found himself calling out, "Miss Katherine, those books look heavy. Mind if I carry them for you?" The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. This wasn't his concern. He had planned to be miles away by nightfall. Yet here he was, offering help to a schoolteacher and 5 orphaned children. Julia's smile was worth the detour. "That would be most welcome, Mr. Miller." That afternoon marked the beginning of Samuel's unplanned stay in White Rock Creek. What had started as carrying books turned into fixing a leaky roof at the schoolhouse where Julia had been housing the Miller children. One repair led to another, and soon Samuel found himself sleeping on a bedroll in the small back room of the schoolhouse rather than continuing his journey. "The children can't stay here indefinitely," Julia confided one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps. The children were inside, the older ones helping the younger with washing up before bed. "The town council says it's not proper. They're talking about sending them to an orphanage in Helena." Samuel frowned. "Splitting them up? Most likely. Not many places take 5 children together." She sighed, looking out at the sunset painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. "They've already lost everything. It seems cruel to take away the only family they have left." Something stirred in Samuel's chest, a feeling he'd long suppressed. What if they had somewhere else to go? Somewhere here in White Rock? Julia turned to him, her blue eyes reflecting the sunset. "What do you mean?" "The old Johnston place sits empty at the edge of town. I rode by it yesterday. The house is sound, just needs work." Samuel surprised himself with each word. With some repairs, it could be a proper home. "Mr. Miller, are you suggesting?" Samuel stood abruptly. "Just thinking aloud, Miss Katherine. Don't mind me." But the seed had been planted. That night, lying on his bedroll listening to the soft breathing of the children in the main room, Samuel couldn't shake the image of the abandoned farmhouse. With proper work, it could shelter these 5 children from both the elements and separation. But who would care for them? Julia couldn't be expected to give up her position as schoolteacher. "Not my place," he whispered to himself. "I'm moving on soon." Yet the next morning found him at the land office, inquiring about the Johnston property. By afternoon, he'd struck a deal using nearly all his saved wages. By evening, he was clearing debris from the farmhouse's main room, working by lamplight long after the sun had set. When Julia arrived with the children the following day, her expression of astonishment made Samuel's cheeks warm with unexpected pleasure. "Mr. Miller, what exactly are you doing?" she asked, watching as he hammered a new plank into the porch. Samuel set down his hammer, suddenly feeling foolish. "Fixing a house." 10-year-old Sarah, the oldest Miller girl, stepped forward. "Is it for us?" The hope in her voice nearly undid him. Samuel cleared his throat. "It needs work, but it's a sight better than the schoolhouse floor." "But who will?" Julia began, then fell silent as understanding dawned. "You're staying in White Rock." Samuel looked away, unable to meet her questioning gaze. "Someone needs to keep the roof from leaking." The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Samuel worked from dawn until dusk, repairing the house that was quickly becoming a home. The townsfolk, seeing his dedication, began to offer help. A farmer with spare lumber, women bringing meals, men stopping by after their own work to lend a hand with heavier tasks. Julia came daily with the children, who eagerly claimed spaces in the four-bedroom farmhouse. With each passing day, Samuel felt something shifting inside him, walls breaking down that he'd spent years building up. One evening, as Julia helped him hang curtains in what would be the girls' bedroom, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Why are you doing this, Samuel?" He paused, curtain rod in hand. It was the first time she'd used his given name. "These children need a home," he said simply. "And you've appointed yourself their guardian? A man who was just passing through?" Her tone wasn't accusatory, merely curious. Samuel gazed out the window at the rolling plains beyond the property. "When I was 12, fever took my parents within a week of each other. No relatives stepped forward. I spent 2 years in an orphanage in St. Louis before I ran away." He set down the curtain rod. No one should have to face that alone. Julia placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You're a good man, Samuel Miller." "I'm not," he replied, unable to meet her eyes. "I've spent years running from attachment, convinced the only way to survive out here was to keep moving, keep from caring too much. And now," he finally looked at her, finding no judgment in her blue eyes, only understanding. "Now I'm wondering if I've been surviving but not really living." As autumn painted the surrounding hills in golds and reds, the house took shape. The children, seeing Samuel's dedication, began to look at him differently, not as a stranger passing through, but as someone they could rely upon. Even young Thomas, still grieving his father, sought Samuel out with questions about fixing things, riding horses, being brave. "Will you teach me to shoot, Mr. Samuel?" Thomas asked one afternoon as they mended a fence line. "When you're older," Samuel replied. "For now, let's focus on skills that build rather than harm." The boy considered this. "Is that why you're fixing our house instead of being a gunslinger?" Ma said men who wander usually carry guns. Samuel chuckled. "I carry a gun because the frontier can be dangerous, but I prefer building to fighting. Always have." "Then why were you wandering?" The simple question struck Samuel to his core. "I guess I was looking for something without knowing what it was." "Did you find it?" Samuel gazed toward the house, where Julia sat on the porch with the girls, teaching them to sew. "I'm beginning to think I might have." As the house neared completion, Samuel's relationship with Julia deepened. Their conversations stretched into the evenings after the children were asleep, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Julia, he learned, had come west after losing her parents to illness, determined to make a difference in frontier communities where education was often an afterthought. "I was so focused on teaching others," she confessed one night as they sat before the newly constructed fireplace, "that I never considered what I might be missing in my own life." "And what's that?" Samuel asked softly. Julia's gaze met his, steady and clear. "A family of my own." The words hung between them, full of possibility. Samuel felt his heart racing, but before he could respond, hoofbeats thundered outside. The door burst open, and the town sheriff stood framed in the doorway, his expression grim. "Miller, we got trouble. Telegram from Helena. Those children's uncle has surfaced, claiming legal guardianship." Julia gasped. "Uncle?" They never mentioned an uncle. "Vernon Miller," the sheriff said. "Says he was back east when the fire happened. He's arriving tomorrow to collect them." Samuel felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. All his work, all his growing attachment to these children, and now a blood relative appeared to claim them? "The children belong with family," Samuel said stiffly, though each word pained him. Julia studied his face. "Is that what you truly believe?" "What I believe doesn't matter. The law recognizes blood, but sometimes blood isn't what makes a family." Julia's voice was firm. "These children have already found their home. With you." The following day, Vernon Miller arrived on the afternoon stage. A portly man with cold eyes and a manner that set Samuel's teeth on edge. After brief introductions at the town hotel, his intentions became clear. "The children will fetch a good price at the mine," Vernon said casually, swirling whiskey in his glass. "Strong boys always needed, and the girls can cook for the workers." Samuel's blood ran cold. "They're children, not commodities." Vernon chuckled. "Sentimental, are we? They're my brother's get, and I'll do with them as I please. The law's on my side." "Not if the law learns your true intentions," Julia interjected from where she stood by the door, her face pale but determined. Child labor laws may be new, Mr. Miller, but they exist. Vernon's expression hardened. You'd do well to mind your own business, schoolmarm. I'm leaving on tomorrow's stage with those children. After Vernon departed for the saloon, Samuel and Julia hurried to consult with the town's only lawyer. Blood relations typically prevail in custody matters, the lawyer confirmed grimly. Unless you can prove he's unfit, he plans to send them to the mines. Samuel protested. Hearsay, the lawyer replied. Without proof, his word against yours. Samuel spent a sleepless night pacing the farmhouse floor. The children slept unaware of the threat to their newfound stability. Julia had remained at his side, equally troubled. I could take them, Samuel muttered. Ride out tonight, head for California, and live as fugitives? That's no life for children. Julia took his hand, stilling his restless movement. There must be another way. As dawn broke, Samuel made a decision. He rode into town alone, finding Vernon nursing a hangover at the hotel restaurant. $500, Samuel said without preamble, placing a leather pouch on the table. My life savings. Take it and leave without the children. Vernon's eyebrows rose. My, you've grown attached. He fingered the pouch. Not enough. Those 5 will bring twice this from the mining company. Then take this too. Samuel placed a deed on the table. The Johnston place. It's mine, free and clear. Worth more than any mining contract. Vernon studied him with newfound respect. You'd give up your home for my brother's brats. They are the home, Samuel replied simply. For a long moment, Vernon considered the offer. Then he smiled thinly. Well, seems my brother's children found themselves a guardian after all. He pocketed the money but pushed the deed back. Keep your land, cowboy. I've no use for it. But understand, once I walk away, I don't come back. They're your problem forever. Not a problem, Samuel said firmly. A family. When Samuel returned to the farmhouse, he found Julia and the children on the porch, faces tense with worry. He's gone, Samuel announced. He won't be coming back. The children's cheers filled the air, but Julia studied his face. What did it cost you? She asked quietly. Everything I saved these past years, Samuel admitted. A fair trade. Later, as the children celebrated with a special dinner Julia had prepared, she pulled Samuel onto the porch. You gave up your chance to keep moving west, she said. Your freedom. Samuel looked out at the land that was now truly his. There, home. I've been running so long. I never realized I was running from exactly what I needed. He turned to her. I always thought putting down roots meant being trapped. Now I see it means having something worth staying for. And is this worth staying for? These children? This place? Julia's voice held a question she didn't quite ask. Samuel took her hands in his. The children, this place, and you, Julia. If you'd consider. He faltered, and used to speaking from his heart. These past months, watching you with them, I've realized what family truly means. Not just blood, but choice. Every day, choosing to love, to stay, to build something together. Tears shimmered in Julia's blue eyes. Samuel Miller, are you asking what I think you're asking? I reckon I am, though I'm making a poor job of it. He drew a deep breath. Julia Katherine, I love you. I love these children. I want us to be a family, properly, legally, in every way that matters. Will you marry me? Her answer came not in words, but in the way she rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his. A kiss full of promise and future. The wedding took place that December, with snow dusting the plains around White Rock Creek. The entire town turned out, having watched the unusual courtship unfold with interest and, ultimately, support. The 5 Miller children stood proudly alongside the couple, no longer orphans, but family in every way that mattered. As Samuel and Julia exchanged vows in the town's small church, he marveled at how completely his life had changed in mere months. The man who had ridden into White Rock believing that the frontier was no place for love or attachment now stood surrounded by both, stronger for his vulnerability rather than weakened by it. That evening, as the newly formed family sat around the fireplace in their home, 10-year-old Sarah asked a question that made the adults exchange smiles. Does this mean we're Millers twice over now? Julia laughed. I suppose it does. Samuel and Julia Miller, Samuel said, the name settling comfortably on his tongue. And the 5 Miller children. 7 Millers, corrected Thomas, who had appointed himself the family mathematician. For now, Julia said softly, her hand resting briefly on her stomach in a gesture that didn't escape Samuel's notice. His eyes widened in question, and her slight nod confirmed what he scarcely dared hope. Their family, it seemed, would soon grow by one more. Later, with the children finally asleep, Samuel pulled Julia close on the porch swing, both gazing up at stars scattered across the Montana sky. "Are you happy?" he asked, still sometimes disbelieving his good fortune. Julia nestled against him. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. You gave these children a home, Samuel." "No," he corrected gently. "We built a home together. And in doing so, you gave me the family I never knew I needed." He placed his hand over hers where it rested against her middle. "A family that's still growing." As snow began to fall softly around them, Samuel Miller, once a lonely wanderer convinced that love was a luxury the frontier couldn't afford, held his future in his arms, finally understanding that the truest frontier wasn't the wild land around them, but the endless capacity of the human heart to find home in one another.